about things, to be responsible citizens in the world that they're going to have to live in, which is going to be a world full of media.
That might be a way to sell TV to administrators is active versus passive learning. A lot of far-thinking or forward-thinking educators now are thinking active learning as opposed to passive learning. Passive learning is easy because you stand up in front of the class, tell them what to do, and they do it. It's easy to teach passively, but when you get into active learning, it's much more difficult. A lot of districts are looking at active learning and trying to do cooperative learning and seeing the value in that because of the skills that it promotes or gives children. And television does the same thing. Television is active learning. So that's a good way to sell it to people as well.
Well, I have a question for all of you. We're meeting here as a lot of access people in one way or another, and obviously we're interested in television in the classroom. The question is, how do we proceed? That is, we have an access center in Missoula as an example. We have a university. We have 4 high schools. We have lots of grade schools and middle schools. What's the next step? I mean, where do we go from here? What's your vision of how this is going to work, or how it should work?
I guess I don't have any long-range vision at this point, maybe, which isn't very good, but I see a stepping stone or two to the future, and that is to go forward with your projects, to promote your own programs. Try and set up a structure. Maybe it's an intermediary structure to something bigger, where you can videotape the sports, you can videotape the concerts, you can videotape dramatic productions. Start to use the access stations that you have, because if they're not used, then I think they will fail.
You're talking about the schools doing this and then bringing it to access,
No.
or what are we?
I think you're talking about individuals. I mean, I think you
Individuals,
can't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, there needs to be a bigger structure somewhere down the road, but to start with, it's got to be some committed individuals saying, this can work, here's what we can do with it, we can do a lot of creative things with it, and show people that there are things that are worthwhile to put on the air.
And I think it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're primarily interested, like you guys have a bunch of tape and you want to do something with it, I assume what I'd recommend you do is go down to MCAT and take some workshops, and they'll be glad to work with you on getting you the skills you need to communicate effectively, because there's visual literacy just as much as there is literacy in reading areas. And maybe you're not interested in editing or something, but they can hopefully hook you up with someone who is. Network with people, find out who's doing what you want to do, and utilize each other. What we do in Idaho, we're real interested in developing distance learning, and not just at the university level. We have a group that meets about once a month at our facility, but it's high school teachers, university professors, people in administrators, and decide what you want to do, and don't worry about funding or anything like that. We just get together and talk about, boy, wouldn't it be neat if this school could link up with this school once a month or whatever. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to go to the cable company and get the capability of doing that. But I really recommend starting to look around. It's sometimes hard to find them, but after you've looked, you'll find there are a whole lot of people out there that are interested in working together and using the media or whatever, and in many different ways.
And I think it is underutilized. I mean, I think you'll find that in your school or wherever you are, there is equipment, and it maybe has a lot of dust on it, and you can get it out, and you can start. And anywhere you start, whatever you feel comfortable with, I think that's the way. If you're a real analytical person and you want to start by analyzing media, that's the way to start. If you want to start because you're a drama teacher and you want to start taping your shows, a lot of times, I mean, you can take a class, but a lot of times you can learn by doing. I'm not saying the kids should do this,
Yeah.
but I mean, as teachers, you can start out and say, well, we'll try to do this, and then, well, that was weak in this way, let's and you can take your time doing that. I just wanted to share a story. I just went to London, and on my way back, I was sitting in a seat in front of 3 teachers, and it was wild, and they were all English teachers, and they knew every grammatical name for everything, and it was wonderful. And they were going back and forth and talking about language and how language is misused, and one was a little more liberal and was saying, well, language is a living art and it changes all the time, and the others were saying, but I've heard politicians use a when they should be using I mean, I don't even know these words. They weren't like pronouns. I know the word pronoun, but I mean, a wild, detailed analysis of language and how disappointed or not disappointed they are. And then all of a sudden, they started talking about the 4th dimension. Now, I happen to be a physics hobbyist, so I read about things like this and particle physics and all that stuff. I like that stuff. So I'm thinking, wow, you're talking about the 4th dimension, which is where particle physics has led to, by the way. So they talked about it for a while, and they had read this and they had read that. And finally one said, but I don't really understand this. And I had been thinking when they were talking about grammar that, well, maybe our teaching establishment is really just too conservative, and we're just never going to be able to compete with Japan or whatever we have to do to bring our educational system up. And here they are talking about that. And she says, well, I don't understand it. And the next one said, well, I don't understand it either. And the third one said, well, I don't understand it either. And then I thought, oh, that's it. It's hopeless, right? We'll never make it into the 21st century. But then they said, and I was so proud, I couldn't hardly believe it. They said, but don't you think that that's the future, is understanding that? And they all agreed that that was the future. And you could tell that if they had a kid that was interested in that, there would be no way they would stop that kid from learning that. No way. They would tell that kid, yes, the future's in the 4th dimension, and you should learn about it, and here are the books. Okay? So a lot of times I think if you're in there with that camera and you have a teacher who doesn't really understand it, but at least knows that it's important, a lot of times they'll use it or let their kids use it. If you can, make it safe and make it comfortable for them. A lot of teachers understand. They are uncomfortable that maybe they don't know enough, but sometimes they don't have to know that much. They can have a kid tape their book reports. They can have a kid tape contests. They can and when the kids start to learn more about the camera, they'll get a little more comfortable. Librarians, a lot of things that we have librarians in schools, a school will have a video club. And that video club is a responsible group of people. They can do it. I don't advocate by grade point average, but I do advocate responsibility in the classroom, because I think if you do grade point average, you lock out some kids that are pretty good, but say they get C's, but they have good behavior, so that there'd be some kind of way that your nonverbal but responsible kids could get in that club, and they do all the shooting for the school. And they meet every day at lunch, and the librarian takes the orders of what the school needs shot, and then that club decides who's going to shoot it. They do it in teams. They're taught by the librarian how to do it, and then that club rotates. So there's a certain amount of seniors and a certain amount. Does that make sense to you? So then the kids teach each other and keep the information on top of it. And little structures like that's just an example of how you can make it very easy in a school. That's the type of thing schools understand. They're very comfortable with that. Those are all responsible kids. The librarian is basically in charge. Similar things like that can work for you. I've seen that happen a lot. Drama teachers a lot of times can get administrations to buy them a camera and an editing equipment. They can do that. And if they're nice, they can share that. A lot of sports teams own incredible amounts of video equipment. You'd be amazed what the football teams own. Really good cameras, really amazing monitors. If you can get friendly with your coaches and say, would you mind showing us? Would you come to our classroom and show us how to use this? Ways like that.
Or use those things that already exist to prove to people that there's lots of stuff, and then from there work on a bigger structure, coordinator for the district or whatever.
I may tie into this a little bit. I think that most people are unaware of the training that your library media specialists have in media. They're the key people. Get to them if you can't convince anybody else in your school districts, because they have received, not varying degrees, albeit depending upon what university they've been trained in. But all of us who call ourselves librarians have training in media. And they're the people that are interested, and they can convince people of the wonderful ways you can teach literature and tie it in with video. They're also the people that are interested in interactive video, which we haven't mentioned here today, which is a marvelous teaching technique. And a lot of times you can convince boards and administrators, but start with those librarians before you go to the other teachers.
Yeah,
'Cause
Marty
the-
talked about that too. I
Yeah.
think that your librarian is your main ally, plus they are always well-dressed, they know how to speak. Their administrator's always like, no, I'm serious. So because that, you really want that. I mean, you have a real strong advocate in your librarian.
They're your allies.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they always like kids or they wouldn't be there, because who could be a librarian in a school that doesn't like kids? Did you want to talk more about your interactive learning? That's kind of exciting stuff.
Yeah, well, we do it at the university level, but there are a lot of places that are doing it. Well, in fact, we're in the process of working on a grant now. We've got the grant for teacher training. We've got a $300,000 grant to train teachers, but no equipment. We're hopefully going to set up a compressed video over phone lines between like 5 rural high schools, well, in the elementary schools too. The idea being, you have all these school districts, you have specialized subjects. Well, each one can't hire a teacher to teach German or whatever, so they could all share the cost of an instructor. The instructor could travel around from school to school, so they do get that personal contact, but they wouldn't have to drive every day. You know, they could go to a central location and have two-way interaction between students at all of the other schools, the way the system works. It can be as simple as you just have a camera and an overhead, and the instructor has to switch back and forth. You can use an overhead pad instead of a blackboard, and they can see and talk directly to each other. When you have several sites, it's voice activated. It automatically switches so the instructor can see the student that's asking the question, can zoom in on them if they want to. They've done this a lot up in Minnesota, and I can't remember. I think it's the St. Paul area. They started out on their cable system. They used the high channel on the cable to send the signals back and forth, and they've eventually got it. It was such a success that they've got their own fiber network between like 3 communities, 4 school districts. It's a real exciting possibility.
And like you said, you can get grants for it. I mean, some of this is real hard and fast, important things to the entire country. It's a very legitimate kind of work right now. Everybody knows that education is in a crisis. Everybody understands that it's an information problem. And if you're doing anything at all that's solid and you can show that you're giving concrete skills to students, you can get a lot of support from your community and from your state and from your federal government. I have found that they know now. I mean, in each small group, I mean, there's always a resistance to something new, but you can get a lot of allies for what you want to do. And there is equipment floating around, so you don't have to be rich. Any questions? Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about, you mentioned the kind of the twins of opportunity and danger that television provides. And I'm glad, because I think it's a medium that's neutral also, is how we use it. And I want to ask you if you could apply the same to Whittle. And if there's a way to use Whittle. Kids watch television 30 hours a week. This is one more. It's in a structured setting. Whittle just got a $100 million, several $100 million of infusion from Wall Street. So TV's not going away, and Whittle's not going away. I want to see if you've thought about perhaps using the same techniques of producing something in the schools to discuss what's happening with these 12 minutes of TV. So you talk about visual literacy, these journalistic questions, asking the kids, say, okay, what stories were covered? How were they covered? What points of view on these commercials? How do you feel now after the commercial? Why do you feel that way? I want to hear your thoughts about using Whittle to get in, so to empower kids to be selective viewers of television.
That was one of my ideas, is that our school district flirted with the idea of having Whittle last year, and then it failed because of the controversy that was involved. And I could see it as an opportunity to pinpoint and target the advertising and analyze the ads, but a lot of people who are critical critics of Whittle said that that won't happen in every classroom, and then as a result, it would be more manipulation of the children than should happen.
It could happen though if a videotape is produced, you're right, because PE classes are gonna have Whittles on in Salem, Oregon, where I am. But if a videotape follows Whittle's 12-minute videotape, and a videotape that probes what happened on Whittle follows,
Sure.
then it's not up to the PE teacher to
Yeah.
lead the discussion.
That was one of my ideas for a long-range plan is we wanted a television journalism class to actually have a television broadcast. If you probably saw TV 101, that sort of a structure, 5 or 10 minutes of news broadcast every room. And that's a good idea, is if a school has Whittle and you can get that sort of a structure put in, then that would be an outlet to criticize Whittle as well.
It seems to me crazy that we, in our educational systems, don't deal with this monster that has kids' attention more than school does.
That's right. But people still aren't convinced. It's really strange that, well, I did a little research on this summer, and I ran across a quotation from Plato. Plato was wrong because he said at one point that he was very fearful of the future of mankind because someday it looked like writing would replace oral communication, and that would be very, very dangerous. Writing is now considered the ultimate in communication, and visual literacy or television is considered the evil sort of thing, so maybe it'll head the same way.
Well, I think it also relates to, there was the big controversy about televised violence back in the 60s and the 70s. And part of the results of that research was that, yes, television can, or media violence can have a big impact. But where does it have the impact? Where there's no other source of information on that subject. So my feeling is if educators are doing their job beforehand, or any of us, teaching people to well, I guess critical thinking is the buzzword now, or whatever, to examine things and not accept it just because it's coming off the TV or just because it's in the newspaper, then they're going to, basically, one of the roles I see of education is not to say, well, this is how we think today, this is how to think, and how to be exposed to a wide variety of ideas and have the faith in people to, well, it's basically what public access is. People don't need us deciding what they need to see and hear. And so I understand the worries about Whittle and commercialism, but I always get to the point where, well, are we being a little paternalistic here? Are we protecting our kids when maybe...
Wait,
Ron,
guys, no, me and then you. Me and then you.
Well,
Okay, no, I'm glad you guys said what you said because it makes me calmer in my heart about this thing that I think is just as good as horrible. The reason I think it's horrible isn't to do with what you're talking about, so I'm glad that you're saying what you're saying because it makes me feel better. What I think is really dangerous about it is that it takes a responsibility off the community for funding their schools. I think that is really horrible. I think we've gotten to the point where our government is so madly in love with corporations, so that we're in the position as individual citizens of a supposedly democratic country, where we have to go to a corporation and beg for handouts for our schools, which are supposed to be the bedrock foundation of democracy, that we should be able to go to the government first before we'd have to go to a corporation and become, what are we, I'm the Exxon school. I mean, what is that? What does that mean? Where have we gotten to politically where our schools cannot afford to stay in the running? I definitely agree. I'm glad you guys said those things because I think we need that equipment. I definitely think we need that equipment. But it kills me that we are so humiliated as a country that we can't get that equipment in a more honorable way. What is going on here? We're not democracy anymore. We are commercialism. I mean, that's how it struck me. And I don't believe it's evil. I mean, I understand. I mean, I think you're right, and I think maybe it'll make people angry. But I would vote to keep it out of my school system for at least another 5 or 10 years until this type of literacy can get more across the board. Because I really don't trust that people know yet in general how to talk back to that box. I've been all over, and I know sort of older kids that just still don't know the difference between a commercial and a show. And I'm an advocate of television. I watch television and I love television. But it just reminds me of all those awful movies of just the worst possible thing that could possibly happen to us is that we become another medieval setup where we're just we grow up working for a corporation. And, that makes me crazy. Go ahead.
That's a great point too, and that because we're paying off this enormous debt, as we reduce state support to schools, then corporate profits
We're
are being
reduced
used
to
being put in
slavery.
for- That's a tremendous point.
that's insane.
I want to give you a little bit of a success story, which I hope is in the process of happening. A couple days before coming here, I had 4 librarians sign up from Salem schools to take our workshops. And one of them I've been talking with for about a year now and getting going. And the project we talked about was a response videotape on Whittle, because 2 of them work in one of the middle schools, the only middle school in town that has Whittle. And I'm encouraging them, and I think that's going to be their first
Please
project,
do it. It's a
is
great
to do a
idea.
videotape, because they know that so many classes in this middle school will not have a teacher who can handle discussion of that 12 minutes.
And it's not their fault. I mean, this is a new concept here of what's going on, and information takes time to get to people. Mr. Wheeler.
I agree with everything you said, and I think if Whittle is in, then there are no alternatives to what you're suggesting. I think it's absolutely essential. But as a television person and as a teacher for too many years, I can tell you, that it's much easier to put people to sleep in the classroom with television or with teaching than it is to wake them up. And so 12 minutes of Whittle requires 6 hours of teaching, right, and helping and waking up. It's just not fair. Teachers can't do that. They have too many other duties. So I find Whittle pernicious for a lot of reasons, but especially that one. I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, I do. I just know that's all I'd be doing in the classroom. So I hate Whittle.
But we want that equipment. We want that equipment in the schools. Yes, we
Have to
do.
have it.
But without that string attached.
But you can only use that equipment for certain things, you see.
Well,
You've
that's
got to
it.
read that
Without that
contract.
string attached.
You have to read that
Exactly.
contract. You can't use that for just any old thing, and you're not going to keep it forever. The minute you say, we're not going to have Whittle in school, that equipment goes out, the wiring goes out, everything goes out. You've got to read that contract, and Chris Whittle will tell you, he'll talk out of both sides of his mouth. Because in one area of the country, he says one thing, in another area, he says another thing, in one community, he'll say something else.
Do you think there's a chance, if you have it stuck in your community, that you could do kind of what Ron and Mary Canty and those guys did? Do you think you can negotiate with them to get like a cable access rights to that equipment so that you could have your shows, can you do that, or is it you're just totally in a passive relationship?
He's in
to that
this
stuff?
for a commercial venture
Well,
to
that's
sell
not
his
acceptable. A
products.
passive relationship to media, I don't think is acceptable in your home, in your school. I don't think a passive relationship to authority is acceptable in this country.
Well, see,
Teachers can do various things, of course, like it's been discussed here, to talk about it in an analytical fashion. But you got to remember that this is happening every single school day, not just for a week, not just for a month, not just for a quarter, every single day of that year.
Now, we separated church and state, now how are we gonna separate
Well,
corporations and state?
Since I'm a journalism teacher, I'm kind of a cynic, but I'm a cynic in the short run and an optimist in the long run. Maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe it's a catalyst for us to see that, people like you who have Whittle come in and say, we've got to combat this, and how are we going to do it? By teaching kids about visual literacy. And maybe it won't happen if there's no catalyst, evil sort of catalyst there to trigger
That's a
it.
really good
I
point.
would
Oh,
like
yeah, but
for
to
Whittle
sure
to be
there's other
removed, but if and only if we as a society said we're going to equip, we're going to get into the electronic age, we're not going to
No.
stick ourselves back in the 19th century, we're going to admit that there's television, we're going to admit that television can do some good, and we're going to teach kids not just to read, because kids, how many hours a week do they spend reading, and how many hours a week do they spend watching TV? Yet how many hours a week do we spend teaching them reading, and how many hours a week do we teach them visual literacy? There's an imbalance here, and I'm just hoping to cure that imbalance, and it'd be great if we would do it with societal responsibility, but we just passed a property tax limitation, and there's no way in the world that our schools are going to have, as the funds dwindle from the state, that the schools are going to get into the 21st century in electronic media.
But don't do it exploiting kids through Whittle.
But
Whittle
that's where the
came-
vacuum is,
Yeah,
Whittle just.
Whittle just
Do it,
leaped in.
explore every other way to get that equipment until you're flopped down on the ground. And don't do it with exploiting my children, and don't do it with my tax money in a public school system.
School board recommended against Whittle, and here it is at several schools. Anyway, I don't know how that happened.
Well, that's what came up in the discussion with Kathy Rogers about whether TV's evil or not. And my contention is that you can't say it's evil yet. I still think that it is reflecting the basic cultural values. As crummy as those values are to the people in this room, maybe I think our culture is violent. I think our culture is superficial. I think our culture is very commercial. And I think that really does reflect, in a democratic society, that is really, and so our issue as educators is maybe we would like to get out there and educate people and use that to educate people in a different way. But I don't think we're gonna, I think we can hold off Whittle for as long as we can, but I don't think, eventually we're gonna have to answer it and come up with something as strong as that. We've just got to.
Yeah, I made the mistake of asking some administrators, I said, hey, why don't we just buy a bunch of satellite time and we could uplink stuff to the whole state? And they went, what?
Too progressive, Marty. You went past their ability, fourth dimension.
But that's what's needed.
Never say bye.
Well, that's what you gotta do.
Does anybody have anything
I don't sugarcoat
before we
much.
close that they didn't get to say that they want to say?
Or questions
Kristen,
that we didn't
anything?
cover?
Well, thank you very much for coming. We had a great time. Good luck.
It just occurred to me, maybe this is a good maturity.
Testing.
Okay, well, welcome to the Government Access Seminar. I'm Paul Simon from Pocatello, and this is,
Glenn Lipsker from the city of Spokane.
and we both work for city government, and our operations are structured in a different way, so we'll both give you a little overview over that, and then Glenn has some tapes to show you. Pocatello Vision 12 is what we have in Pocatello. It's community access. It's been around for about 13, 14 years now, and we are the only access center besides Mountain Home, where Karen is from. We're about 350 miles in any direction. Pocatello is kind of privileged to have the channel, and we're a public service channel. We do some public access, some educational, and some government access. But the city administers the channel. So I'm a city employee, department head. The channel is treated as the police department, fire department. It's just another department in the city. We're independent of all the other departments. The government programming we do versus the public access program we do, it's not clear cut. I could say that maybe about 10 or 15% of our staff time is spent on the government access area. And I would categorize government access as productions that the staff of the channel initiates and does most of the work on. Then it involves government officials. Public access, we also do some shoots. Staff does some production, but quite a few volunteers are involved in that. Our funding comes from the cable company, franchise fees, and an access fee. The access fee comes right to the channel. It's $2 per subscriber. It's in the franchise agreement. The franchise fee goes to the city, and we compete with all the other city departments for whatever part of that franchise fee that we can get. And it's about half. The city gets 3% of the gross revenue, and we get about half of that. And that level has been maintained for several years, and it seems like that level is going to continue to be maintained, but not increased. So what we're doing right now is trying to find some other sources of funding, other ways to increase. As, for instance, staff stays on longer, their salaries go up. There's less money for other things in the budget because we're on sort of this fixed level. And been very careful not to have any kind of commercial programming, but we're starting to do some sponsorships so we can raise some other money. Most of our government programming is city council meetings. We do those live. We also replay city council meetings. We have a lot of live call-in shows. I think government access is part access of the government to cable to be able to communicate with citizens, but a lot of it is just access to government and to have two-way communication. And our city is pretty small. It's about 45,000 people, and it's very informal. The government, the way they interact with the citizens, is very informal. City council meetings, sometimes it's just extremely conversational. A lot of the other meetings, I was surprised, when I started there about 2 years ago, that it was that way. And we started a lot of these call-in programs, and the government officials really like it. And occasionally, there's if it's a hot topic, there are quite a few calls. We have 2 cities, Pocatello and another small city, so we go through the mayor and city councilmen. We also go as far as people on advisory boards. And a lot of the other government programming we do is kind of promotional for the city. Pocatello has had sort of a low self-esteem, poor self-image for many years, and it's been depressed economically. A lot of businesses have left town. Part of what the city asks us to do is to help improve the image of the city. And we do sort of a magazine program going into interesting aspects of the city, or there's been a lot of history happen, so we go back into the frontier days and Indian history and work on that. There's a Sister Cities program now, and we work with that. Anything that, good news about Pocatello, and we do a show like that. And then there are quite a few programs that community volunteers do that bring in government officials. We have several people who have programs and go with government officials and the mayor and other people. I don't know if you consider that government access or not, but I do, even though the staff really isn't involved in those programs. We're part of the government, but I'm very careful to keep a distance in a way. In the past, Pocatello was known for having a situation with the Aryan Nations with the Race and Reason program, and it got a lot of national press for Pocatello, and the way Pocatello dealt with it was a national model and something Randy was involved in. Because of that situation and how the city dealt with that, and it was in a positive way, but at the same time, I know that everyone else in the city likes to keep a certain distance from the programming, and there's been no kind of interference at all. So we're part of the government, but at the same time, we act independently. And that is probably the most interesting part of the job is walking that line in between. We are going to be building a new facility in the next year, and they're going to put us in City Hall now. So this is a new situation that I think we will be doing more government programming. We will be working with other city departments just because it's going to be so convenient for them to ask us to do things for them. Right now, the amount of in-house productions we do are kind of at a minimum. When they bring speakers in or have seminars, sometimes they'll ask us to tape them. If we have time, we'll do it. A lot of the city departments sponsor programs. They'll bring in an informational program from out of town. as long as they sponsor that program like any other community access person does, that program goes on the air. We tend to treat the other city departments the same way we would any other community organization or individual. And as public service channel, as part of the community, we're in the library, we do some informational programming. We get program series from out of town, health-related series or education. Even if they're from out of town, we show those as well. Moving into this new building is going to mean that it's possible that there'll be some pressure on us to do more government programming and less public programming. I'm wondering how our volunteers are going to feel going into City Hall, being right by the police department and so forth, different than they do now, coming into the library with this very open feeling. And, that's going to be our challenge for the next couple of years, to make sure that transition is smooth and so we don't lose people.
Are they building an annex for you or something?
Well, we're building, it's a large square building, and the main entrance to City Hall is going to be on one side. The police department is at another end, and then we're on another end. So we're going to have a separate entrance, and it'll be a discrete facility. There'll be a back door into the rest of the building, but it will be separate. We'll have a separate parking
Are they
area.
building an entire new city hall or something?
No, it's just remodeling an old building.
Does the city have any say in what you put on your channel, or is that up to you? Do you have to-
They have no say. There is a cable commission which meets monthly, and for policy, changes in policy, for instance, I get their approval for something. I have never asked anyone in the city, other than a legal question, asking the legal department about something, maybe copyright or so forth, but never asked anyone else in the department for permission or if anything was okay. I mean, the station's been established for a while. Everyone pretty much understands about free speech, and given with race and reason, they had to deal with the most extreme situations. So hasn't been any kind of interference. And when I, for instance, started the sponsorship situation, went through the cable commission for that. Any other questions right now?
Over to me?
Chime in.
Okay. I made bounce all over. I kind of scribbled some notes, and then I kept scribbling and kept scribbling. It looks like my resume. My name is Glenn Lipsker. I work for the city of Spokane. I'm director of telecommunications. And we're strictly a municipal access channel. My responsibilities are split between running what we call City Cable Channel 5 and then doing AV services for different departments of the city, which can be kind of pulling, it kind of pulls and tugs, because that means I have about 40 different bosses with all the department heads and then 6 city council members and a mayor. So have to be real careful of how I divvy up my time. In general, just kind of some basic information background about the city of Spokane. There's about 180,000 people, population-wise with Spokane. There are 75,000 households on the cable system right now, and the cable system there is Cox Cable. We are really fortunate in that the system has been around so long. We just renegotiated our second term. The first one was for 15 years. This one was renegotiated for another 15 years. In the initial negotiations, there was 1 government access channel, 1 public access channel, and 5 educational channels. So that's quite a few access channels. In the renegotiation process, we demanded that what we got, we didn't demand anything, it was a long-term process. We asked for a second government channel, provided that we can prove that we can fill up the first station with enough programming. And typically a second government channel would be used for strictly public safety training. We use 3 hours a day, from 9 to 11 in the morning and 1 till 2 in the afternoon, Monday through Fridays, for strictly fire department training. And the program is scrambled. It goes to the fire department, and they're the only ones that don't get it scrambled. And then the reason being is because it's pretty graphic stuff, you know, the fire scenes, it's actual footage. Also, we don't have the copyright. One of them we could get copyright allowance, but one of them we cannot. As far as what we provide, as far as municipal access, we have 200 regularly scheduled meetings per year. City council, county commissioners, the county pays us on an hourly basis to run their meetings. We have park board, youth commission, planning commission. We even started the bid awards, so vendors wouldn't have to come down to City Hall. And it's strange as that may seem, I mean, that only lasts about 15 minutes every Thursday morning, but we get a lot of calls as far as, you know, when is this gonna be on the air? Because there's so many businesses that are hooked up to cable TV as well. We also have, like I said, we provide AV services as well. We also have another 100 to 150 meetings per year that we do that aren't regularly scheduled. And these are Washington State boards and commissions, like Healthcare Commission, Children and Family Services, Department of Ecology. And that tends to be a really good relationship with the state because it's hard to get representatives and legislators from the west side over to Spokane. So we get them in town, and then the council has access to talk to these people. So it's a pretty good working relationship. As far as other programming that we do, like I mentioned, we do city council. It's every Monday night at 7 o'clock, and then we replay it Tuesdays at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and Wednesdays at 8 o'clock in the evening. Also, 3 times a year we go out on location. We use the cable company's remote production van, because we don't have one. We have field production gear, but we don't have a remote production van. We go to community centers, which has actually turned out to be a real nice option. So people who don't want to come down to City Hall can show up at the community center, and the council always reserves time for just general public input from the neighborhood groups. So that works out really well, and the cable company has been very cooperative as far as that goes, providing staff and equipment. Other programs that we do throughout the year, we have a candidates forum every fall, depending on who it's for. City council, local judges, county commissioners, things like that. And we're able to do that with the League of Women Voters. They sponsor this, so there's this nonpartisan group in the center who are kind of the mediators, so there's no bias involved as far as how the forums are run, and that has worked out really well also. The only, I wouldn't call it a problem, but the only thing that I've had to stay on top of is the league has a different chairperson every year and different people involved, so we have to keep good notes and go over the basics every year as far as procedures, the format, etc. But that has worked out really well. We also work with other groups. Like there's a group that is formed called the Network for New Priorities, and that is basically, there's just a couple of people who have kind of formed this group, and what they do or have done in the past is they take a representative from various organizations throughout the city, like the Physicians for Social Responsibility or Hanford Education Action League and so on and so forth, and then the network will pick a topic, and then all these people come in and they give their input, and then we mail tapes to representatives such as like Speaker of the House Foley and senators, things like that. And that has worked out really well. We've gotten a lot of input. We had a forum set up last year. It was in December. It was before the war really broke out in Kuwait and Iraq, and it had snowed. It was over a foot of snow the night before, and it was still snowing that day, and 250 people showed up. I mean, the streets were still full. I don't even know where everybody parked. I don't even know if anybody made it home that night, but it was a very well-attended meeting, and that one went out live, and like I said, we took the copies and sent them to representatives. The city has also used the channel for, just recently, a city manager retired, and in part of the assessment process for a new city manager, they went through the regular kind of closed session assessment centers, and then they had a session in the evening where they fired questions at these candidates, and that was televised just to give the general public some kind of feel as to who these people were, since they were from all over the country. That worked out quite well. Another thing that I noticed, I've been with the city for 3.5 years, and after covering all these meetings, you pick up the newspaper in Spokane the next day and you read an article and you say, what meeting was this reporter at? I mean, it really, Spokane is unfortunate that we have one newspaper. Actually, there's an evening and a morning newspaper, but it's owned by the same company, same editorial staff, same letters to the editor, but they say it's two newspapers, and it has something to do with monopolies. They also own a TV station there, and the independent production company I used to work for, they bought us out 5 years before I quit them. So as far as getting a good, broad view of news in Spokane, it can be tough sometimes. So it's we get a lot of support from City Council that way because they know that, the meetings are there. It's just, it's out on the table, and what you see is what you get. And also, we provide copies. Boy, you got a party going next door. You might have that here early. But in that respect, I get a lot of support from the City Council members. Let me see here. What else do we have here? We do a monthly magazine format program called Spokane Insight. And that is typically just taking topics of interest, general interest. It might be kind of showing the insides of a department, or it might be taking an issue. Like, a long time, a year and a half ago, there was a problem with a dam that was leaking, and the news people gave it about, 45 seconds. We went in and did an in-depth story about the dam and the whole procedures, and that they were going to have to drain the river down way low. And so it was getting information out to the public as far as people who live along the river, and just general information, how long the problem was going to take, what it was going to take to mitigate the problem, etc. And then we just have some general information programming. This month, September, we had 3 segments. One was highlighting a murals project that was sponsored by the Arts Department, where they take all these underpasses that were typically real dark and dingy and graffiti ridden, and they got the power company to put in more lights, and then the Arts Commission painted some of the murals, and students painted some of the murals, and it was really a nice project. There's 7 different underpasses that are now have artwork in it, so it's great. So we did kind of highlighted that. We did an informational program on Historic Preservation Office and what they do. A lot of these departments are small, they're not funded very well, and they just don't have the money to go out and promote themselves. So that's what we do whenever we see something going on. Either they contact us, or we'll, if they forget about us, we'll, through the course of all these other meetings, like City Council and County Commissioners or Planning Commission, we'll know what's going on and approach them and say, hey, this would be a really good topic to talk about. There was another segment of this program, and this one was kind of instigated by or initiated, whatever, by the mayor. She came to us and said, there's this wonderful program for physically and mentally disadvantaged people that the Parks program puts on. Why don't you guys do a program about it? So when I talked to the Parks people, I said, well, there's so much going on in the recreation division that people don't know about, including things like a free lunch program for lower income families, and all types of sporting events for physically handicapped people and so on. So they just gave me like sheets of information. They said, here, make it a program. So that's was another segment. Like I say, that's a monthly program we call Spokane Insight. I do have I was thinking of showing maybe one segment later. It's only about 4 minutes, so I won't like drone on with that. Let's see what else we have here. As far as meetings coverage and programs that we do, we also have a reader board that goes on when there's not regularly scheduled programming, and we use a text scan character generator. What we do, we use that for a lot. We promote activity, we promote meetings, times, and places. We have our schedule that rotates on there. We promote activities and events at city-owned facilities, such as the Opera House and Convention Center, Ag Trade Center, Coliseum, etc. And that does 2 things. It lets people know what's going on. It also helps generate revenue for the city, so it's a good 2-way street. We also promote jobs from city jobs, county jobs, and Washington State Employment Office. We don't take jobs from employment agencies, and we don't compete with them. So that's kind of how we made the decision to, those categories, government jobs, basically. We also promote activities and events from nonprofit organizations. whatever, fundraisers for different groups. And then also promote things such as free and low-cost health programming that we get from health organizations. So it's a real wide mix of what we promote on the reader board, and we update it all the time. The jobs we update 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We also do promote information. We'll start here real soon and run it until spring like we did last year. We get faxed on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, as far as air quality conditions. And Spokane is much like Missoula. You know, city sits in a valley, and if people start burning their wood stoves, it can get pretty bad. There are burning ban days, and so we, on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, have that flashing up so people know whether or not they can burn, unless it is a sole source of heat for them. Typically, when I'm dealing with nonprofit organizations that want to promote activities, basically, you know, who is the group, what, when, where, why, and then we ask for a telephone number so people aren't calling us all the time to get information. So, I mean, if you don't get the telephone number, you know, we get information. Just by, as a matter of fact, we have a free program guide that goes out on a monthly basis, and either people can write for it or they can call. And just by seeing a phone number, we get all these calls. Where do I file for a divorce? Who do I call for you know, to get my driveway plowed or whatever? You know, you get a phone number up there. People call for city, basic city information. So yeah, that's good. People are watching, I guess. One of the things that I noticed when I first took over the job 3.5 years ago is there was only about half the meetings coverage and not much kind of peripheral programming, and the reader board wasn't updated regularly. And so what would happen is you'd watch it and be the same stuff for 3, 4, 5 days in a row. So we changed that by updating it on a daily basis. We won't run information typically for more than 7 days. I've enhanced programming by having alternative programs or series on, so that when people are tuning through their cable, they'll see something and say, hey, that's pretty interesting. We get a lot of free series. There's one called In Print, and some of these play on public access stations as well. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with government access, but it's just filling in the time blocks so that the reader board isn't on all the time, and kind of emulating a commercial station without commercials. America's Defense Monitor, which is a wonderful program. These retired generals. I don't know, has anybody in here seen it? Yeah, it's great. They talk about military policy from all these retired generals and colonels who can now talk about it. You know? And so, what are we really doing in South America? It's an interesting program. Eco News, when we get from California, super good sense from Bonneville Power Administration about energy efficient building techniques and weatherization, all kinds of things like that. It's a good one for the general public. Crime File is a series out of, I think it's Washington, D.C., very up-to-date topics about a lot of different issues. And then so we have the series, and we have miscellaneous programs that we just kind of fill in. We call them our blocks of 8. This just has to do with how we program. We might play these programs for like 2 days, sporadic, you know, intermittent kind of programming. And those are anything from programs that we would get like from the Attorney General's office on how to stop fraud or fraud in Washington, to programs on AIDS, to programs on radon mitigation, to programs on wetlands. There's one called Monitoring Mount St. Helens that we got for free. And then there's some series that we get from NFLCP project that we get for relatively cheap. They'll send us the masters, we'll copy them, give them it's depending on the program, it's between $25 and $45 for I'm not sure how they break it down. It's like this one-time fee, and then there's a $25 licensing fee. So it's relatively cheap for some very good programming. They've been played before on PBS, but they're pretty much non-dated. So they can be played for a few years sporadically, and people comment on that all the time. They say, oh, I saw this program, when's it going to be on again? So we know that people are tuning in. And basically the reason I do that, nobody's really questioned it. And people call in. I haven't had any negative comments. The only people typically that call in, they want to know when it's going to play again. Like I say, by emulating a commercial station or something, just to have regular programming all the time, people flip through this, say, hey, there's an interesting program on. They get used to tuning into Channel 5. So that's the reason behind it. as I said, we're kind of split. We're a 3-person department. Budget last year was $109,000. We document different projects for different departments. Sometimes maybe interview training. We'll document interview training, or we'll do something with phone system training or things like that that won't have anything to do with the channel, but that just kind of takes up our time as far as being AV support for the city. There's 3 full-time people on staff. As I mentioned, we just got through with contract or franchise negotiations with Cox Cable. What came out of that, basically they wanted 25 years and they were gonna give Channel 5 $25,000, okay? I came back saying no, 9 years, and actually I wasn't the negotiator, I was more of just a staff support person. The assistant city manager and a city attorney and an outside attorney who was learned in cable negotiating, worked on the hardcore and nuts and bolts of the contract. I would just support as far as giving them information what I thought I needed. I asked, I said that I thought it should be a 9-year contract, was my personal view, and that I needed $406,000. Well, what all shook down is they gave me $260,000. It was $150,000 immediately, and then I don't know how it came to this. The 2nd, 4th, 7th, 9th, and 12th years of the franchise, we get blocks of $22,000. As far as, and that's just for capital. That's just for capital expenditures on video equipment. We're funded out of the general fund as well. The city gets a 5% franchise fee, which is in the neighborhood of $500,000. I beg and borrow out of the, to the general fund, to the powers that be every year. And like I say, we're at $109,000. I actually realistically should be getting $120 to $125 to keep the level of services up. But that's the ongoing battle, I guess, is trying to get as much money as you can out of the general fund. I made a big mistake the way I operated the department, and I now in hindsight I see it, is that I used to work for, well, back in '77, I was working with 2 other people on an independent video production company, and as the time went on, we eventually got bought out by Coles Publishing and turned into a 25-person operation. That's about when I jumped ship. It got pretty big. Now there's like 45 people, and they have a facility in Seattle. But when I came out with the city, after that I quit and I helped a friend make a feature film. And this is all stuff we were doing, like nuts and bolts and scraping by and things like that. And that's kind of the way I'm used to operating. So when I got this department with the city, I ran it the same way. I tried to scrimp and save, and figuring that this is what you want to do because this is the general public's money. But what happens is it doesn't necessarily work like that. If you can show that you can work with less money, they not only cut your funding, but they say you can probably do with less. So it's kind of a weird situation to be in. You try to save money for the general public and you get burned for it. So it's a tough situation to be in. If I had to do it all over again, I would have probably spent more money or deficit spending, which sounds ridiculous, but now it's coming back to me. And they're saying, and typically because federal revenue sharing has been cut totally, and that's between $3 and $4 million to the city of Spokane, and that's about the neighborhood of the deficit they're running into next year. So they're taking it out of departments, so it's gonna hurt. What I'm hoping to do, I'm kind of bouncing around, I'll come back to something later. What I'm hoping to do is to lock into a percentage of the franchise fee. I know that I'm gonna get a fight about this, but it'll be a good fight. Another thing that I'm proposing to do, and this is just, everybody's situation is different. The cable company gave me $150,000. I didn't spend it for 6 months. They didn't put that interest. The city did not put the interest in my fund. I lost $6,000 roughly. The remaining monies that I didn't spend for the rest of the year is another $2,000. So I'm just going to bill the director of finance for $8,000 and say I want it in my budget next year. He'll hit the ceiling and we'll have it out. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a legitimate, cost to him. Many of the meetings that we do for Washington State committees, they'll call me, I'll tell them what the fee is for renting the facility. It's a wonderful facility. It's 200 seat, it's got tiered floors, there's a dais with 13 microphones, it's an automatic microphone system. The feed goes, we have monitors in front of each chair, audio monitors. We've got video monitors, the feed goes to the chambers, to an outside room, there's a press feed, it goes out to the cable station, it goes to our decks, and I mean, it's a really nice setup. But typically, when I tell these commissions and committees how much it's gonna cost, they'll call the city manager will call me back and say, we're waiving the fee. So I'm accumulating all those costs right now, and I'm gonna bill the city manager's office for last year's and put that on my budget for next year. So it should be pretty interesting winter. So that's, and typically, like I say, I don't have interfund charging capabilities. There are other departments like purchasing or reprographics that anything I do, they'll charge me for. But I don't have, as of yet, the ability to charge other departments. And I don't really want to either, because it's the smaller departments that don't have the money that need the services most, like the Arts Commission and the Youth Commission and things like that. So, what I'd like, that's just another point that I need to bring out. As my interfund charges are raising, that hurts what I'm able to do for other departments. So there's a lot of inequities there that I'm hammering out right now, and it'll be interesting to see what shakes down come this January. But I think we're all in the same boat as far as tightening budgets and things like that. I had mentioned, one of the things that I was fighting for, I was talking about earlier, is the cable refranchising. I had asked for like over 400,000. They came back with 260,000. One of the big discussion points, I guess, was maintaining our location at Channel 5. In Spokane, that's a wonderful, starting from Channel 2 and going up, we have the CBS affiliate at 2, then we have the Fox affiliate on Channel 3, and Channel 3 is a hot spot anyway. You come off your VCR and that's where you are, you know. Channel 4 is the ABC affiliate, then we're there, then the NBC affiliate, and then the public broadcasting station. So we've got good company on either side, and the cable company really wanted that, to put whatever, A&E or Discovery or whatever. So that was a major battle, and that kind of brought down the money that they gave me, a little bit. Otherwise, they would have put me out on, who knows where. Which is fine, but I'd rather have that access for the people who are flipping through the stations to be right in their face. And that's just more along the lines of like promotions and things like that, getting people aware of where you're located and what you offer. So that was, like I say, that was a good battle, and we won that one. With the monies that we got last year, I just upgraded the facility. It's small, it's narrow. It looks like it's one of those deli counters. We had 3/4 inch before, and I just decided to stay with 3/4 inch SP, go with SP, and we were a cuts only system before, using the 9800 series, by the way. Now we have an AB roll capability. I'm going to upgrade the graphics. We have a VP2, but it's really old and it's dying out. I'm looking at a PESA. I'm not sure if you've looked at the lower end PESAs. They're around $7,000 and they're really, really nice. PESA bought out 3M. 3M is no longer in the CG business. And PESA took it over. They're providing the Olympics with all the character generators in Spain. I just happened to know a technician who was reading up on it and got one for a demo and let me demo it one day. And it's really simple, it's really quick, and it looks nice. A lot more powerful than the VP2. And for $7,000 or that general ballpark, it's if you're looking at a CG, that's one that you might take a look at. We were a 3-camera operation in the council chambers. They're wall-mounted remote control. I just put a 4th one in, which makes coverage that much better. We used to have. I had that video at home and I forgot to bring that one. Anyway, we have good council coverage as far as camera location. We also upgraded our field location gear. We use 3/4 inch, go out on locations, do the magazine format programs, and have a camcorder as well, a VHS camcorder, to document projects that might not be cable cast, but just to have for future reference. One of the things that we documented this year, and it hasn't played yet, we haven't put it together yet, but it's a controversy in Spokane, is a waste to energy plant. It's this incinerator, and it was probably the most controversial topic and the biggest public works project the city's ever gone into in its history. So I was out there, they gave me free access to run around and videotape it, and so I have full documentation of at least how it was put together, if for no other reason, in case it doesn't work and we happen to see something. So that's, those are the types of projects that we might just document. Let's see here.
Glenn, let me interrupt for a moment.
Sure.
Well, you talked about charging other government agencies for use of your facility. What criteria do you use, or what hourly rate, or how do you break it down? What figures do you come up with the charge?
If we're charging an outside group for something, it's typically just for the facility with audio. It's $40 an hour during the day, $45 an hour at night. For videotaping, 3-camera CG, it's $90 an hour. It's a flat fee. So we don't, we generate about between $7,000 and $9,000 a year. It's not a whole heck of a lot. But like I say, there's so many meetings there that the fees get waived. So it would be, it would easily be double that, But that's just kind of the rule of thumb, and that's dirt cheap, really. I mean, for a 3-camera operation, or now 4-camera operation. So, but we try to recoup some of the expenses. Which, like again, I say it's kind of sometimes I get frustrated because I'll want to charge these groups, then it'll get waived, or even if I charge them, it goes into the general fund, and I don't see it. So there's some inequities there. It's like I say, it's it's an ongoing battle, but so far we've been winning.
Does the public have any access at all?
Well, typically, I would say typically no, because there's a public access channel. I mean, they have 2 editing suites, a studio, and their own channel. So typically they would go over there. However, there has been, as far as like programming goes, there was a programming just produced by 3 public access producers called Forum, and they took 2 government officials and 2 citizens who were very actively involved in local politics and a local news anchor woman, and they had a discussion about how people, does government really listen to the local citizenry, and how can people get involved in local politics. And there was 2 half-hour segments, and it was a really good program, and they offered it to me to be able to play on my channel, so I'm going to play that in October. So there is some access to our channel as far as that goes. One of the things that's going to be interesting is requirements as far as disadvantaged or disabled people. I'm sure within the next year, as a matter of fact, the affirmative action and human rights people, as well as the legal office, have contacted me about closed captioning or open captioning, and what we'll do in the council chambers itself for hearing impaired citizens. And that's something that it's going to be interesting, because that, as far as where the funding is going to come again, I'm not sure. So that's I've got to do what I can to get funding. One option I've been thinking about, and I'm actually going into it as soon as I get back, is the possibility of, in this general programming category, is getting series from PBS series that they are releasing, and then having them underwritten by local companies, like maybe the water power company or whoever, where at the end of the program, this program is brought to you, or was underwritten by whoever, ISC Systems Corporation or Washington Water Power. If I can get 2 or 3 companies to sponsor series like that, that'll help overcome the revenue problem we're having. So there's a couple different approaches to try to develop, or maintain funding, or generate new funding. That'll be interesting. It's just I'm not sure if it's going to work. As far as I know, it's entirely legal. I'll have to check with the legal department, but as far as I know, there should not be any, as long as there's not any kind of commercialization within the context of the program. But I need to double check that. Now, last thing to talk about is Cable Advisory Board, and that's something that's new to the city of Spokane. The first franchise never had a Cable Advisory Board to speak of. Cable Advisory Board is all volunteers, different citizens around the city. It's a really good, enthusiastic group. A woman who's Liz Plastino, who's in charge of the Spokane Art School, is a board member. There's a Jesuit priest from Gonzaga University. There's the manager of KSPS, local public television. There's Rick Mendoza, who's an auditor for the county and very involved in local Hispanic affairs. It's a well-rounded board. There's about 10 members. And so far, so good. These are, they're volunteering their time. They're learning about cable as we go on. So it's kind of my job to, whenever possible, to get information to them that I might have access to that they don't. So it's like I say, it's a young board. They're still learning. We're all still learning. But at least it's in place. And as citizens are showing up and they're voicing complaints or concerns or whatever, or just if they have general questions about maybe even public access, is it promoted enough, etc. So it's the board it's a well-functioning board, and so far we're going in the right direction. I hope it keeps going that way. I'm not a board member. I'm just a liaison, a staff support person to that board. Other than that, I kind of bounced around. Are there any questions?
I'm sorry, I'm late. Do you do any of your council meetings? Do the council committee meetings? Like here, I sometimes wonder in Missoula, we do our city council, sessions, but I think so much of the significant work in process goes on in committee meetings. And I'm just, I wonder what other examples exist for what might be the most efficient.
There's a lot that we don't cover, but there is, like I said, the park board, planning commission, youth commission, arts commission. STA for some reason didn't. They stopped airing or having their meetings in the city council chambers when I took over. I'm not exactly sure why. They just soon not be aired. The cable advisory board is not aired at this time. Actually, there was a person from public access who came in with a camcorder and videotaped it and then put it on public access. The board typically at this point does not want to be videotaped, and I think their feeling is, I don't think that they have any reservations about the information exchange at the meetings. I think that they don't want to inhibit anyone from the general public at this point from standing up and saying their piece. And that's something that I noticed. Like I said, we do 200 meetings a year, regularly scheduled, another 100 to 150. And they're all different levels. Some there's no audiovisual services at all. Some there's audio and video for delayed playback. Some there's live with support videos that are played during the meeting themselves. And a lot of times with the more technically sophisticated or technically advanced meetings, people are inhibited. You don't get the same type of gut level reaction and exchanges that that you would have if there weren't a video camera there. And I think that the board at this point, I think eventually like the cable advisory board will be aired, but at this point they're a little bit reluctant to.
You could say that same about a city council meeting, though.
Well, the city council has been aired for 15 years or more, and they've just gotten used to it and take it for granted. I mean, when people run for the position,
it could still inhibit someone from the general public coming in and addressing.
At times, I think that it does, because there's some people who will come in and they'll just start giving a presentation and they'll just start literally shaking. I mean, we've got TV lights on, the dais is raised, there's a testimony stand and 200 people behind them on a slanted floor, and it does intimidate some people. It does intimidate. But on the other hand, at least they can watch it at home, they can get the information, and they can either call in to the council members or write letters and things like that. But yeah, that's definitely a concern, that some people do feel intimidated by that.
Yeah, I think it really has an inhibiting effect too, and our council meetings have gotten to the point now where people are saying now they're actually addressing the cameras, holding up things for the cameras, having people stand up and why don't you turn around and face the camera. And I don't particularly like that, but we're stuck with it right now. And our council meetings, sometimes very little goes on. I'd like to do study sessions and other meetings, but I feel like if we did that, well, the decisions would just go further in the background. And that is one of the problems, because I feel like our council meetings now are more like a television show than actually coverage of a meeting.
Well, I was going to say that I go to our city council meetings here in Missoula, and with the kind of cameras they have up there, which are permanently, they're mounted and stuff, and there's virtually nobody there. They've always done radio. They did radio before, and now they're doing that. That it's so unobtrusive. I mean, there is no presence in the room, unless it's one of the regular TV networks, doing something special, you know, that, I don't think it's inhibited anybody in our city council meetings. Not at this point, we just don't have the kind of presence there. We don't have extra lights, we don't have a, you know, a lit podium and all that sort of stuff. What you see is, from those cameras is what you get, and that's about it. And I
Which
think
is
that
great.
helps a lot,
Yeah.
because if it's gonna look like a TV studio, then that's the effect it's gonna have on people. But, so the less obvious I think some of that is, the better, particularly when it comes to public comment.
I think also, I think our meetings have gotten longer where people have come in for public comment, and it seems like they're more addressing, you know, the council, the cameras.
The
as
audience.
opposed to-
It takes a very good chairperson or mayor or whoever's in control of the meeting to control the meeting.
Do you have time limits on y'all's meetings, for public comment?
You know, it depends on the topic. If, a lot of times if it's a hot topic, the mayor or a council member will say, can I see a show of hands of people who would like to comment? And if it's, you know, if everybody in the audience, they say, well, we're going to ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Otherwise, it's, we've had meetings that started, like I was talking about the waste to energy meetings controversy. We had a meeting once that started at 7 o'clock and didn't get done until 3:30 in the morning. And it was just like, I mean, you've heard the same comment a number of times, but I mean, it was interesting, it was good, but that's a long meeting, so.
In Ashland, I think access has made our meetings shorter. Lots of times people will stay home and wait for their issue and come down for their issue, whereas before we had to get bigger halls and it's taking us a whole lot less time to go through issues than it did without access. I noticed a real difference there.
That did, the one specific time I know that happened is, I'm not sure if you heard me talking about the Network for New Priorities, the group that like 2 or 3 times a year will pick a topic and then representatives from organizations will come in. When we had the one on the Middle East conflict last year, I mean, people just kept coming down and coming down and coming down. When we initially set it up, it was gonna be an hour long, and we just extended it. Hey, it's my channel. So it went on for 2.5 hours. And so it was, as people saw it, they just kept coming down. So it was wonderful in that, in that respect.
So that was a live program
Yeah.
that you also sent to a representative.
Mhm.
That was one of those productions that you said you borrowed the cable truck?
No, that was done in the city council chambers. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we had requests from one of the educational channels and from the community access channel to replay it as well. So that worked out really well.
When you borrow the cable company's truck, it's not the one used for public access, or do they have an LO channel as well or something? Or what do they use their production facility?
They split their remote van from public access to commercial production. They have a regular commercial production facility. There's not a whole lot that goes on as far as on location with the public access group there. It's a lot of shooting in the field and coming back and editing film style or studio work. They have access to it, but there's not that many requests. So, they always seem to cover things like St. Patty's Day Parade, which is a lot of fun. But there's not a lot of local, requests from groups to use that access vans, as far as I understand.
One other way we use access is we try to bring young people into the process, more high school age and junior high. We do music, so when we have our reader board on, we have people do kind of radio shows, and that's the background music for that. There is no non-commercial radio station in Pocatello, so we're kind of a source for people to learn how to be a DJ or to play music that otherwise can't be heard, and at least it's really caught on as far as the high school level especially. You probably have your reader board, you do probably use the NPR station.
Yeah, NBS is, KPBX is the background.
And that's
Is
pretty.
it live or tape?
It's both. It's live generally during the day, and then at night taped, overnight taped. But that's it's not a big investment on audio equipment, and you can outfit an audio facility with a couple of CD players and a turntable and a cassette and a mixer and a mic fairly cheaply, and do it yourself.
One thing that I wanted to mention, it's kind of off on a tangent, but I was mentioning that we got monies from the cable company to do a major upgrade. And so that's kind of how I spent my summer vacation this year. One thing that I found was invaluable to me is I spent the money to hire an outside consultant to help me design it and install it and test it, rather than relying on the local distributor of video equipment. What I have found out, is particularly throughout the Northwest, is video equipment companies are bailing out left and right. Midwest Communications, they're gone. There's other companies that are having a hard time, and they're not getting this. They're not getting those people, those salespeople, and all the little franchise offices are not getting a lot of support, and they're hurting, and they don't have the time. They typically do not have the time to design a system right for you. If you have any extra money and can find an engineer that has worked on a station before, boy, I'd say that's the way to go. Initially, I started working with a distributor, a salesperson, and I got some information that was just downright wrong. And luckily, I found a tech who was kind of out of work. He used to work for a production company and then was going out on his own, and this was his first job. We actually spent about 9 months designing it, because what had happened is you get those glossy brochures, and they read well and all that, and then he was saying, well, let's get some of these technical manuals. Let's spend a couple $100 and buy technical manuals. He wanted to go through it, and we got these manuals. He said, hey, this won't work with this. This is going to take a major modification here. This, they're claiming it'll do this, but there's, he found a lot of potential problems. And the system that I came up with is just, it's real nice. I set aside, like I say, with a $150,000 budget, I spent $130,000 of it. I set aside $4,500, and that's what I told this person I had for designing, installing, testing. And this is there's 135 different items I got. I mean, anything from, C-mount rings to edit controllers to whatever, preview monitors to wall mounts for cameras to the decks to whatever. And I told him, I didn't actually tell him how much I had. I think initially I said I had about $3,500. Well, it ended up that I knew there was going to be some overrun. I figured out his time that he spent on it, and it would have cost me over $12,000 to have the same work done if I would have just done it on an hourly basis. So I just approached this person and said, this is how much I have. Can you do it? Sure. And that's the best money I ever spent, without a doubt.
How did y'all do that in Pocatello? I mean, do you have a support person on staff that's like that, or do you go get outside help when they're going to make major equipment purchases?
I'm lucky I have a half-time technician who is highly overqualified for what he gets paid and what his job description is. And before he came on, it was a real problem because we had to send everything out. My engineering background is not too extensive, but it's worked out. I have 3 half-time staff besides myself, sort of a production person, an office manager, and a technician. So in our facility right now, I mean, we don't have, it's going to be about a year before we buy any equipment, and I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of new equipment. I mean, we're getting a new facility built. The city is paying for it as part of the new city hall. They're not going to increase our money for new equipment. And we're going to have to do what we can to get a new lighting system, because we're a bigger studio, things like that. But not a whole lot of design. We're going to just take the old equipment over. I'll show you a video.
Any questions?
I guess something that worries me, and NCAT here in Missoula, is always the idea of funding. And y'all touched on that briefly, that everybody right now is looking at having to investigate avenues for raising more funds beyond what your franchises were, your agreements with the cable and all that sort of stuff. But nobody said about anything specific or general ways of doing this. Can it be done like public radio, or is that a no-no in the sense of TV, public access TV? I mean, can those things be run the same way,
Well, my policy is nobody raises money on the channel, so the channel's not going to be used for asking for money by us or any other group. But fundraising events, we do. So we would have a benefit concert, something like that, or a dinner, or one thing on anything to raise money, even in, you know, just $1,000 and $2,000 increments, and that's what I'm working on now.
Where'd you get that guideline? No
I'm not sure. I guess it's something I've picked up over the years, because I've never seen it done, and anyone asking for money on an access channel.
Is that written into your bylaws? Or?
Well, it says maybe used for no commercial or profit-making purposes. I assume that includes us. I know if we tried it, probably no one would say anything, but it's kind of.
Yeah, that's why I say I'm trying to do things like underwrite programs and above and beyond the cost of the program, to generate funds that way for the department. And then billing departments back, and then fighting for, you know, part of the franchise fee, and just see what happens. It's gonna be that's my big battle coming up the next few months. So.
How successful are you at underwriting?
Haven't tried it yet. That's what I'm just kind of heading into. I've talked to a representative from a power company about the possibility. They have a big push called Excellence in Education. And what I'm thinking of putting together is there's some series that I would like to run, kind of generic, non-governmental programming, just kind of filler programming. I'm not sure if you heard me talking about that. Oh, okay. And if I could get them to sponsor a series, you know, underwritten by them, for, let's say, and in the series I can probably get for a total of tape cost in about $100. But if I can tag and underwrite like a PBS station for, let's say, maybe $6,000, well, if I can get 2 or 3 companies do that, then, you know, I'm out of my financial problems for this upcoming year. And that's what I have to check into when I get back. I think there's a real good possibility.
Any idea what the fees would be, or what the overall cost for putting the closed captioned or this?
No, I really don't. I've got some information. I've done some preliminary talking to people, and there are so many different options. I mean, if you open caption something, well, basically you're not doing that live, I don't think. I mean, you're taping it and then running it again and editing it down, and you have to have a person to do that, basically a half-time to full-time person, depending on how many meetings. So that's going to be, it'll be interesting. Or the possibility of, well, there's signing, and we've used some signing in some meetings where it's been requested, but that's good if people know how to sign. You know, people there may not know how to sign, but
More than one sign language.
yeah, yeah. So that's a real sticky issue that I have to dig into here over the winter time.
Back to underwriting. How do you propose to write the proposal to the umbrella companies in terms of how they'll fund you? You'll just say the series costs so much and ask them for it, or?
Mm-hmm. I'll just come out with a fee saying, I mean, not that the series costs this much. I don't even know if I'll bring that aspect up, because if they find out how cheap it is, they'll say, well,
That's what I'm wondering. So how do you word it so that they think they're getting a good deal?
oh, if I could compare it to any other station, which isn't really legitimate. I mean, there's no true, I mean, you can't compare apples to apples if you're talking about an NBC affiliate or something like that. But just the exposure, saying you're getting this much exposure, and you're promoting local government, you know, access. I mean, to them, like $6,000 a year to get maybe hundreds of messages out there over the course of the year is peanuts.
So you're mostly talking to them about the profit to them and not so much, you don't necessarily have to cost out.
Right, that would be my initial approach anyway. If it fails, then I'll go back to the drawing board, try a different approach with a different company. But then initially, I would go from a public relations standpoint and just saying you'd get so much exposure from this, and they'd see like a figure like $5,000 or $6,000 and say, hey, this is nothing. This is the cost. This is the cost of maybe 2/3 of one of our nice brochures that will be in circulation for, you know, the next utility bill, or not utility bill, but their own bill mailing or whatever. You know, I mean, it would be so cheap to them that I'm hoping that they can't pass it up. We'll see though. Next year, you'll find out. I'll see you at a meeting and I'll tell you if it worked or not. So, but I've never tried this before, and it's just I have to do stuff, you know, something to raise, you know, to generate revenues.
One idea I got from PBS is it's like a laminated card. It's the membership card. You're like a supporter of Channel 12. It's $30. And there are 12 little blocks on there. There are 12 different discounts you get for community events during the calendar year. So so 2 for 1 at the local ski slope, 2 for 1 athletic event at the university, plays, those kind of things. And, you know, the value's something like $75 or more if you use all 12. And so that way, and plus you get the newsletter in the mail that way as well.
Yeah, that's a real good idea. I haven't heard anybody doing that before. Do you do that, or do you have somebody
We
who
do that.
volunteers to
No,
solicit
well,
businesses and things like
no,
that?
I've done it. But I mean, there are, as a government institution, there's some ways that we're forbidden by Idaho state law to raise money, like having a raffle,
Yeah.
a lottery, and some other things too. This way seems to be, you know, legal department said it was fine, so we're doing it.
How many members do you have?
How many have bought it? About 50,
How long have you been doing it?
2 months.
And you put on your reader board, or you have PSA for it, or?
Yeah, just word of mouth more and in the newsletter. It's just something I started.
And how much is the membership?
$30 for an individual.
And do you have up to $1,000 like some of the PBS stations do?
You mean you could contribute more?
Uh-huh.
I haven't, no, I want to do something with like an organizational membership, but, no, this is just for an individual person.
You can't
It was
even
a-
advertise this on your own channel, because that would be fundraising.
I guess so.
Necessarily.
I guess so. I guess that's why I haven't done it.
That's a good idea, though. That's a real good idea. Huh. Another option. Well, this session is almost done. Well, there's the program I talked about, the Spokane Insight. One of the segments I threw up here, no, I didn't really, I threw in here. And this is the one that they asked if we could promote what was called the Fun Shine Day Camp. And I said, well, listen, why don't you promote all the recreational divisions, show what they do. I mean, there's so much that's offered through the Park and Rec Department in Spokane, it's unbelievable. Like the food program and disabilities program and things like that. So this is just one of the segments that we came up with this month. And if you see the tail end of George Bush, I think he is promoting environmental stamps or something like that. We tag it together with PSAs we get from different areas. There's one for that Will Vinton did again on drug abuse. It's a claymation deal. It's pretty neat. Oops. Hold on a minute.
There are actually 3,200 acres. The highest list of amenities are its parks. While the larger parks, such as Manitou and Riverfront, get much attention for their open spaces, beauty, and landscaping, there are actually 3,200 acres of open parks and park facilities throughout the city. It is the charge or responsibility of the Recreation Division of the Spokane Parks and Recreation Department to provide activities to all citizens of Spokane. This is regardless of their socioeconomic status, physical or developmental ability, or age group, and this is no small task. This year, the Summer Parks program staffs 21 parks with parks leaders, one of the last free supervised programs in the state. The parks are supervised from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. each workday and offer a variety of activities and special events. Literally thousands of children each week participate in the programs. They range from campouts to arts and crafts, penny carnivals to drama, to a very favorite which is called Everyone's a Winner. You guessed it.
Couldn't afford a narrator, sorry.
Everyone is a winner. Another very popular program is softball and baseball. With 49 playing fields spread across the city, it's almost impossible not to see a game in progress all summer long. And while the competition may be a little stiffer among the teens and adults, T-ball will most likely remain more of a spectator sport. In the long, steamy days of summer, it's nice to know that open swimming is an activity that is offered free of charge to all youth 4 through 17 years of age. The aquatics program also offers affordable swimming and water safety classes, and for those not financially able, there is a scholarship program available. For the advancing and competitive swimmer, swim meets are also held throughout the summer months. All told, the city's 6 outdoor pools help take the heat out of a warm summer's day. In any given summer month, Approximately 500 individuals with developmental or physical challenges are offered a variety of classes and activities throughout the Parks Department. Besides such programs as wheelchair tennis are canoeing, adapted water skiing, river rafting, fishing, and much, much more. One of the favorite programs for developmentally disabled is Funshine Day Camp in Mission Park. Games, activities, arts and crafts, and just having the opportunity to share time with other friends and to make new friends is what any camp is all about. This program continues to increase in popularity and size each year. Another important aspect of the summer recreation program is the summer lunch program. Through a grant from the United States Department of Agriculture, parks located in lower income areas of the city are provided with a free lunch. Last year, over 37,000 lunches in 19 areas were served throughout the city. This year, the average is about 900 lunches per day. It takes a well-supervised and coordinated staff to utilize the 56 developed parks, 6 outdoor swimming pools, 49 softball fields, 29 basketball courts, 18 soccer fields, 57 tennis courts, 17 wading pools, 40 horseshoe pits, 70 sports fields, and 3 golf courses, soon to be 4. And what this translates into for the summer months is a very important aspect, and that is of employment. During the summer months, over 500 youth are hired, making the Spokane Parks and Recreation Department one of Spokane County's largest employers, and in doing so, promoting the leadership qualities, values, and social interaction that develops good citizens and hopefully future leaders in the community. Annually, the Recreation Division sponsors approximately 4,000 activities for youth, teens, and adults alike. For all the effort put forth in offering these activities, the Spokane Parks and Recreation Department is proud to have been 5-time national finalists for the coveted Gold Medal Award for Excellence in Park Management and Administration. And this only reaffirms their goal of providing outstanding recreational activities in one of the finest city park systems in the country today.
So it's kind of PR and light information. What's that?
Did you write it?
That Parks one? Yeah. Yeah, there's no real staff writers. They just gave me 3 pages of information and say, do a program. And this one's more of kind of twofold. Just let people know how their money's being spent with the Park and Rec Department. And there are really good programs that people don't know about that they have a hard time promoting. We also do PSAs for different departments, and one of the PSAs we do actually twice a year is to let people know that the Parks and Rec's program schedule is coming out in the newspaper. So we'll do a PSA. I have a really good relationship with the local affiliates, and they just play our PSAs a lot. We get a lot of airtime. The only time I really tracked it, I figured I got between $10,000 and $12,000 worth of free airplay on 3 stations. So it.
And do you produce them all for free? For the
Yeah.
park?
Yeah. For the different departments, we produce them for free. So we're kind of scrambling around between meetings and PSAs and the Insight program and things like that. So keeps us busy. Anyway, that's about it. I think this session's over. I'm going to throw something in, and you go ahead and leave. But just in case you're curious about what our reader board looks like, I'll put that in.